So at Soccer Perspective, we usually don't do any book reviews that are non-soccer related. However, in this case, I'm forced to make an exception simply because this book transcends a single sport. The items that we learn through this autobiography are so important that you start to relate to them no matter what sport you play, coach, or support. Today we're going to talk about Andre Agassi's autobiography called Open. So not only is this book one of the best autobiographies ever written, it's also a great book for tennis. Watch this video till the end to understand how this book will give you some fresh perspective, whether you're a fan, a coach, a player, or simply a supporter. Before we begin, if you'd like to buy this book, click on the link in the description below to get a 5 to 10% discount. For those who don't know Andre Agassi, he is a former American tennis player who was ranked number 1 in the world. He's also 8-time major champion and 1996 Olympic gold medalist. Agassi was the first man to win all 4 singles majors on 3 different surfaces: hard, clay, and grass. Andre Agassi's autobiography Open teaches us some valuable lessons, and I'm going to break these down into 3 categories: parental pressure, athlete character development, and sheer professional determination. Open was ghostwritten by Pulitzer Prize winner J.R. Moringer, who also ghostwrote Phil Knight's memoir Shoe Dog. If you haven't read that, that's an excellent book to read as well. This work was so well constructed, and Andre Agassi laid it all out: the good, the bad, and the ugly. And the author did a phenomenal job of telling his story. So let's look at what this book teaches us about the first category: parental pressure. Like so many successful athletes in the world of sport, and I'm thinking Tiger Woods, the Williams sisters, parental pressure has been the single most difficult element that a lot of sportsmen and women have faced through their childhood and teenage years. Agassi was also the product of a parent who aggressively made him pursue tennis starting from a very early age. Based on the descriptions of his childhood in the book, I consider his father's behavior totally abusive. And then he was snipped off to a grim Florida tennis academy where he was allowed to drop out of 8th or 9th grade but still continued to focus on tennis. For some reason, Agassi's father was just hell-bent on him learning the sport of tennis. He did so with his other kids as well, as mentioned in the book. The second element that this book teaches us so well about is athlete character development. Open is an unusual sports memoir in so many ways. For one, it avoids all the cliches about the love of the game that we typically find in professional athletes these days. Agassi absolutely hated the game, and he was pressured to continue to play the game through his childhood. If you read Pele's autobiography, for example, he talks about his love for the game since he was a boy. Michael Jordan talks about basketball in a similar way. These athletes felt one with the sport and badly wanted to become professional athletes. In sharp contrast, Agassi was the complete opposite. He hated the game and wanted to do everything possible to never play tennis again. Agassi's announced theme is that the game he mastered was a prison, and he spent about 30 years trying to escape this very prison. His first cell was the backyard of the court his immigrant father built behind the family's house in parched outskirts of Las Vegas. The gossip and sensationalism often overshadowed his accomplishments on the tennis court, and I think one of the purposes of this book is to set the record straight. He did really have a remarkable career. For example, he's one of the very few players to win an Olympic gold medal and all 4 slams: the US, French, Australian, Open, and Wimbledon. And his career lasted until he was 36, well past the average retirement age of most tennis players. But as the book explains, he broke onto the scene at an early age and was very, very ill-equipped to handle fame, success, and failure. So he's gone through this journey throughout the book where he's explained through all of these troubles in his childhood and his teenage years, how he actually managed to develop himself as an athlete. And these are some very valuable lessons for athletes these days. And the third thing this book really teaches us is about sheer professional determination. Agassi turned pro when he was a rebellious teenager, and the spotlight on him was when he was still trying to figure out who he was and before he had developed any sense of emotional maturity. He was a prodigy, but his early career was characterized by inconsistency, and his entire career was steeped in fierce emotion. Figuring out who he was is a constant theme in the book. Throughout his life, Agassi tried to surround himself with a supportive team of people. I assume to heal the emotional damage that his father inflicted. Some of my favorite stories in the book are of his close relationships with his team members, especially his personal trainer Gil, who became like a father figure to him. Agassi, despite his incredible success, comes across as very vulnerable and wounded. So I found myself wanting him to have a good amount of loving people in his life. He ultimately found fulfillment in the family he started with Steffi Graf and in the mission of the charter school that bears his names. It was a grueling long road for him, but he finally seemed to be at peace with himself. All in all, this is a very nice tale about an athlete's professional journey from childhood to his teenage years to his professional career. It really mixes the three lessons really well that I mentioned. And you don't have to be a tennis fan to enjoy this book. It just goes through this journey of a kid who didn't know how to react to certain situations or who was forced into doing something he didn't really want to do, but then realized that that thing that he was forced to do, he's really good at, and how he can work on certain things to make himself better. There's some really important lessons here that athletes, fans, coaches, parents need to understand and learn from. So I highly recommend this book, Andre Agassi's Autobiography, Open.